Mr. Antonio Guterres, United Nations Secretary General, welcome to Al-Arabiya, sir.
It's a great pleasure to be back with you.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to start with the news. Today there's a delegation from the EU, high official from the Egyptian government, and a delegation from the Palestinian Authority on the Egyptian side of the Rafah crossing. There are preparation for the opening of the Rafah crossing with administration by the PLO staff, monitoring by Egypt and the EU, and some even talk about opening it tomorrow with this arrangement. I would like to measure your reaction for such a development of opening the crossing under the administration of the Palestinian Authority.
I think it's essential to have the Rafah crossing opened, and I think it's very important to associate the Palestinian Authority to that fact. First of all, we absolutely need to increase the support to the people in Gaza, even if we were proven right when in the past, remember, with all the difficulties in humanitarian aid in Gaza, Israel was always saying that it was the UN that was not able because everything was possible. And we were saying, no, it's the obstacles, it's the problems, it's the difficulties created by Israel or the looting that is taking place. And the truth has, the day of the ceasefire, 800 trucks entered. The next day, 900 trucks entered, which proved that we were always ready.
Yes.
That we could always have done it.
Yes.
And if we have not done it, it was because there were serious obstacles to the entrance, and there was the looting that also miraculously disappeared as soon as the ceasefire took place. Now, having said so, Rafah is crucial, Rafah is essential, and I believe that the fact the Palestinian Authority associated is very important.
Very important.
I believe this is a moment in which we must have some clear objectives. First, this ceasefire cannot end. We must have a permanent ceasefire. We cannot go back to the level of destruction and death in Gaza. Second, I think it's very important to have a link between Gaza and the West Bank and to oppose any attempt to, as some people say, do the annexation of the West Bank. If there is an annexation in the West Bank, what will happen to millions of Palestinians that will be in a country where they have no rights whatsoever? We need to keep the link of the West Bank with Gaza and to keep that link in the perspective of the two-state solution. And it's very important to have the Palestinian Authority associated to this link. So I believe these objectives must be pursued by the international community.
So can you give us your reaction, since you mentioned it yourself, about the American plans and proposals to repatriate Palestinians to Jordan and Egypt, which has been rejected by both countries and the Arab group of ambassadors here at the United Nations? How dangerous is that for the two-state solution?
Now, we believe that it is absolutely essential to avoid any kind of ethnic cleansing. I always defended...
You consider this ethnic cleansing?
I always defended the right of Israel to have a state and the right of Israel to have security in its state. Yes. But simultaneously, I always defended the right of the Palestinians to have a state and to be able to live also in security and in harmony with an Israeli state. And obviously, if you take the population out of the Palestinian territory, you create a high risk that you make the Palestinian state impossible forever.
You wrote a letter this week to the ambassador of Israel here at the United Nations, Danny Danon, explaining that Israel, as an occupying power, does not have sovereign powers in the occupied territories to take decisions like the ending the work of UNRWA, the essential work of UNRWA, and that any changes in the status of UNRWA or any other organization of the United Nations must be done in negotiations, in consultation with the United Nations. Did you receive a letter, an answer from the Israeli government to your letter?
Well, there has been many letters, but
Okay.
the point is that letters do not change the law. And international law is clear. And we have a clear mandate from the General Assembly in relation to the work of UNRWA, and it is absolutely essential to preserve the work of UNRWA.
Let me be clear. They responded to you?
And it is clear that Israel, as occupying power, has not the right to undermine the mandates of the General Assembly and violate international law.
So they have responded to you?
Oh, yes, we have been, as I said.
There is give and take.
An exchange of letters. They are all public, by the way.
Okay.
And I think it is clear that we are right.
In spite of the hardline statements from both sides, the Israelis, Hamas, Palestinians, do you believe that we will reach stage 2 of the ceasefire agreement in Gaza? And most importantly, are we going to reach stage 3, the reconstruction, which is, there are so many statements on the reconstructions as well. Witkoff, the U.S. envoy to the Palestinian and Israel, is saying it's going to take 10 to 15 years for the reconstructions. The United Nations saying it's going to take up to 21 years just to remove the rubble. That is going to cost $1.2 billion to do it. So we are not very clear about these numbers. If you can clarify.
Let's be clear. What is the most important objective? The most important objective is to make sure that this ceasefire becomes permanent. Because we are talking about reconstruction, we should avoid destruction. And we had enough destruction.
Of course.
And yesterday I received 4 American doctors that have been working in dramatic circumstances in the hospitals in Gaza, and so horrible things happening. And we have 2,500 children that need medical evacuation immediately and need the guarantee to be able to go back to their communities after that. So, I mean, first, no more destruction. First, permanent ceasefire is an objective that we must pursue. Second, with these guarantees, I think we need to mobilize the international community for the reconstruction of Gaza, especially if that reconstruction is integrated in a process that will lead to the two-state solution. It's difficult to imagine now in detail what will be the time and the cost of the reconstruction, because the level of destruction is enormous. There is ordnance that has not exploded. I mean, you have, I don't know, below the rubble, many people. So it's difficult to say scientifically. It's X years that it will cost X $1 million. But it is an obligation of the international community to do everything, if peace is established, to do everything to guarantee the reconstruction of Gaza, for the people of Gaza to be able to live normally.
I'd like to move to Syria quickly. Syria took giant steps this week on Wednesday by dissolving the parliament, the previous parliament, by stopping the constitution of 2012, disbanding militias, disbanding 𝘂𝙪𝙩𝙩𝙚𝙚 itself, appointing Mr. 𝘼𝙪𝙩𝙩𝙚 as president for the transitional period, which is about 3 months. All steps were actually welcomed by the Arab countries and even by the world. The EU, the United States have suspended many of the sanctions on Syria to help them in their endeavors to rejuvenate the Syrian economy. You said something that the Syria is still a big question for you, and that you're wary, in spite of the openness and the tolerance that you felt. Are you still wary, Mr. Secretary General?
Well, I am worried, but I am hopeful. I think it's important to recognize, first of all, that the end of the Assad regime is something that is extremely important for the Syrian people and for the region and the international community as a whole. So, a very clear signal of hope. Second, I think it's necessary to say that the new de facto authorities have been saying the right things. But it is also true that here and there we see
Worrying
some
signs.
areas of concern.
Okay.
And what is vital is an inclusive process in which all communities feel included, and that will allow for a Syria where all Syrians feel that they are in their own country and that their country respects their different religions, their different ethnic backgrounds, and that they will all participate in the life of the new Syria. And I believe the international community needs to support that. And that is the reason why, since the beginning, I've said that the first step should be a clear signal in relation to sanctions. Obviously, there is a long process, and there is also something that the Syrians must do. But I believe it's important to start by meaningful action to alleviate sanctions that dramatically impact overwhelmingly over the Syrian people themselves.
Yes.
And of course, the political objective that motivated them, the Assad regime, is no longer there.
The Israeli Defense Minister, Israel Katz, has said 3 days ago only that their forces will stay in the Syrian side of Mount Hermon till the end of the winter at least. How do you see this development of Israeli moving into Syrian territories?
Well, Israel was already in Syrian territory.
Of course, in the
it's just
Golan
an expansion.
Heights
I think
yes.
it's important to say that the territorial integrity of Syria must be respected, and to recognize the Golan Heights are Syrian territory, and that this expansion is something that aggravates something that is already against international law.
But how can we get them out? I mean, do we leave it to their good intentions and goodwill to withdraw when they want?
I think there must be, from the international community, pressure in this regard. But obviously, it is important that Israel itself understands the need to respect international law.
The Lebanon-Israeli ceasefire agreement was agreed on 27th of November. How do you see the chances of Lebanon finally emerging as a strong state with the recent election of the president, the prime minister, and in your last visit, did you see what convinced you that Lebanon and the Lebanese people is turning the page at last?
I was extremely hopeful in my visit to Lebanon. I had excellent contacts with the president, the acting prime minister, and the future prime minister, with the speaker of parliament, and with different other personalities. I visited UNIFIL, and I was extremely hopeful that Lebanon will be able to consolidate its institutions and to have a government that all Lebanese feel corresponds to their wishes to make Lebanon work positively for its people. Now, it is very important that the agreement that was made now to prolong to the 18th is respected. It's essential that the Israeli forces leave the Lebanese territory in the 18th. They should have left the 26th of last month.
Of course.
Because if Israel forces do not leave Lebanon, that will make the life extremely difficult for the credibility of the new Lebanese institutions, and that would only serve the interests of Hezbollah. So I feel that it is absolutely essential that the Israeli forces leave Lebanese territory the 18th, as is now agreed.
Yemen, the Houthis hold now detainees, 23 UN staff in Houthi detentions, 16 from before and 7 more on the 23rd of this month were detained. You have suspended, or the consequence to this holding, the humanitarian UN aid in Houthi areas. For how long will these 70% of the Yemeni people live in Houthi areas? For how long you intend to keep this suspension, and what does it take to lift it?
Now, we want, and we have been very patient in relation to this. We have had UN staff arrested. We have 15 members of the crew, the past crew of the ship that has received the oil of the Safar tanker, that now that there is a Yemen crew, they should leave, and the Houthis do not allow them to leave. I mean, the Houthis need to understand that they need to respect the UN, and they need to respect all those that are there to support the community in Yemen. Yeah. And we will do everything to make sure that humanitarian needs of the Yemeni population are met. But I think the Houthis need to understand that there is a limit in the kind of arbitrary, unacceptable action that they have conducted, namely in relation to UN staff that is there to serve. They are Yemenis themselves, and they are there to serve their fellow citizens in distress.
Within hours after Trump's inauguration, President Trump's inauguration on January the 20th, Trump redesignated the Houthis as foreign terrorist organization over their attacks on the Red Sea and Israel. How this will affect humanitarian work by the United Nations, and can I have your reaction on this redesignation?
This designation, it's important now to see if there are unintended consequences. Is that exactly what we are studying? Because one thing is to condemn the Houthis, the other thing is to undermine the support to the Houthi population. So we are exactly studying now how it will be possible to maintain humanitarian aid independently of this designation.
In Yemen, about 150,000 people were killed, civilians and fighters. 4.8 million displaced and refugees have resulted from the civil war inside the Yemen. 19.5 million people in 2025 are in desperate need for humanitarian aid for daily needs. What does it take, in your opinion, to bring the Houthis back to the negotiation table and to talk about peace and a final solution?
I think it's essential that those that have been supporting the Houthis, those that have contact with the Houthis, to convince them that it is absolutely essential that they participate in a serious effort to reestablish peace in Yemen. And by the way, we were very close to that when the Houthis started bombarding ships in the Red Sea, which of course did not help at all the Palestinian population and created problems, first of all, to Egypt, that lost large part of their income in the Suez Canal, and to the international community as a whole. We were very close to start a process led by the UN after the understanding that Saudi Arabia had established with the Houthis. And so, I mean, we need to go back to that situation in which the Houthis concentrate on the problems of Yemen, and concentrating on the problems of Yemen are open to serious negotiations for peace to finally be possible in Yemen.
Sudan, since the hostilities broke in April 2023, became the largest humanitarian crisis in the world. What can be done to bring the parties to the negotiating table to find a solution? What is 𝘼𝙣𝙩ó𝙣𝙚, your special personal envoy, is telling you about the possibilities of achieving peace in Sudan?
Well, if I knew how to bring them together, we had already done it. It has been a nightmare. I mean, we have seen a number of initiatives that took place. We have seen the Jeddah agreements. We have seen the involvement of... But the problem is that you have countries that are involved to help solve the problem and countries that are involved to help
themselves.
keep the problem. And weapons go on coming to both sides, and this creates a situation in which it's very difficult to bring the two parties to a serious negotiation. Our first priority, and that is what 𝘂𝙣𝙩𝙩 is doing, is to guarantee the protection of civilians, is to guarantee that the Jeddah Agreement is implemented. And we had a number of important meetings with different personalities, organizations of the Sudanese society. There is a strong consensus that this is needed, and now we need to put pressure on the two sides to finally understand that the war is not the solution, that we need to have protection of civilians, we need to have a ceasefire, and then we need to have an inclusive political process.
In Libya, with the latest appointment of your special representative and head of UNSMIL, Mrs. Teta, are you optimistic that Libya will move towards elections and to the right? Why should we believe that Mrs. Teta will be more successful than Ghassan Salama or Abdullah Batili? Many SRSG came and gone.
Again, in Libya, let's be clear, we need those countries that are not Libya and that are involved in Libya defending their own interests to understand that it's better for them to have a Libya in peace and united. Everybody will benefit. And second, I think it's important that those that are occupying the present positions of power in Syria, in Libya, to understand that this is not something that should justify keeping things going on and on just to be there. That we need a Libya in which the Libyan people can choose the Libyan leaders.
I've got my signal. I have one last question about the administration here and the withdrawal of the United States from the Paris Climate Change Agreement and from the World Health Organization. I'd like to hear your reaction. And are you looking forward, or do you have plans to meet with President Trump soon?
Of course, I'm always ready for that. And
to meet him.
in relation to the Paris Agreement, it's not the first time. Our position is clear. The Paris Agreement is one of the most successful diplomatic achievements in the history of the United Nations. And on the other hand, we are very hopeful about the capacity of all the states, the companies, the vitality of the American society, because the truth is that renewables are today much cheaper than fossil fuels. The truth is that the economics of climate are now favorable to green energy and to the green economy. And so we are convinced that the American society will go on in progress towards climate action. On the other hand, we believe the work of the World Health Organization is very important. But, I mean, we are talking of things in which we disagree, but there is something I would like to say today here. We have seen the ceasefire and the release of hostages dragging. We were waiting for an agreement, and the agreement would never come. And we have seen the international community trying to make the two sides come to an agreement, and the agreement would never come. And I know that Hamas was complicated, but I was also convinced that the Prime Minister of Israel was also not so interested. And the truth is that I believe that a robust diplomacy of President Trump made it happen. And so I think it's important to recognize that there are aspects of disagreement with this or any other country, but that we also must be able to recognize the positive contributions. People are no longer dying in Gaza. That is very important, and I believe Trump has contributed to that.
Antonio Guterres, Mr. Secretary General of the United Nations, we thank you for this exclusive interview, and we wish you and the United Nations and the world a much more peaceful year in 2025, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Shukran.
Shukran. Thank you.